Hello, I'm Rob McKnight, and coming up on McKnight Tonight, has Peter Dutton completely lost the plot with his idea for a referendum, or is it actually a good idea? An assault on the Aussie system that keeps medicine cheap in this country, important information you need to know. Has Married at First Sight gone too far this year, and could it lead to the show being cancelled? And I have for you the stupidest comment that was made as those astronauts stuck in space returned home, and seriously, this is stupid.
McKnight Tonight. McKnight Tonight.
Wrong again.
McKnight Tonight. McKnight Tonight.
I've seen that since university.
Funny, insightful interviews from a watchdog producer. McKnight Tonight. McKnight Tonight. McKnight Tonight. Here comes McKnight Tonight.
Hello and welcome to McKnight Tonight. It is great to have your company on this Saturday night, assuming you're watching us live, of course. Hey, very shortly I'll be speaking with Josh Fox. He is the man behind the MAFS Funny podcast, and he's made headlines this week over his ACCA, a current affair type interview with John Aiken, where he was chasing him. Nine's hypocrisy on this issue is unbelievable. They sent him a cease and desist letter over harassment, and when you think about what ACCA does every week, it's crazy. And look, don't forget, if you're watching the stream live, please leave a comment on any of the topics we talk about tonight so that we can include your views in our feedback segments. And if you'd like to support the show, you can always buy me a cuppa. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/McKnight Tonight. That's buymeacoffee.com/McKnight Tonight. All right, let's get into our hot topics.
Here comes McKnight Tonight.
And we begin with opposition leader Peter Dutton, who made headlines this week over his idea to hold a referendum on deporting criminal dual nationals as part of the coalition's plan to toughen the requirements for Australian citizenship. Here's Peter Dutton speaking to Natalie Barr on Sunrise this week, explaining his plan.
Do you really want to send voters to another referendum poll?
Well, Nat, I want to keep our country safe. That's the first priority, and it's the first responsibility of any Prime Minister. And at the moment, we've got people in our country who hate our country, who want to cause terrorist attacks. And my argument is that if you betray your allegiance to our country in that way, you should expect to lose your citizenship. We would never grant somebody citizenship if we knew that they were going to undertake a terrorist act. And somebody who signs the Pledge of Allegiance to our country and then breaks it in such an overt way, or is involved in child pedophilia, for argument's sake, I believe that the community standard demands that people who don't abide by our laws and don't respect fellow Australians and want to harm women and children, I just don't think that they deserve priority. We've got millions of people who want to come to our country who are good people, and we have a great migrant story in our country, but if we want to keep ourselves safe, we need to make sure that the laws reflect the community values.
Seems to make sense to me, but the idea has faced a lot of backlash, including from a dozen senior coalition figures, with one labelling the idea insane. Even former Attorney General George Brandis, a Liberal, has rubbished the proposal. I have to say, I don't know what I'm missing here. Why shouldn't we have the right to kick out terrorists? If you're a dual citizen and you do the wrong thing, then surely you don't deserve to live in this country. Isn't it as simple as that? Of course, nothing in Australian politics is as simple as that, as we saw as the Sunrise interview continued.
The number one priority in this country, the polls say 80% of people care about, is cost of living. Can we afford hundreds of millions of dollars on another referendum?
Well, the first issue is to try and keep people safe. That's always the first responsibility. And in terms of cost of living, of course, that's our priority economically, because the government's made a number of decisions in the past two budgets which have really made it harder for Australians.
Yes, so
I don't think the threat of inflation has gone away.
Yeah,
do we
spend money on a referendum right now when everyone can't afford their tomato sauce?
If we believe that we want to keep people safe, if you want to keep your kids safe and we want to keep kids safe in our community, then I don't think you can put a price on that. But you can deal with community safety at the same time that you can make good economic decisions to help people deal with Labor's 30% increase in grocery prices.
Why is there this belief that we can't do two things at once? Now, look, I don't actually have a problem with Nat Barr asking that question, because she would have been caned if she hadn't. But governments are able to do two things at once. And as for the money on the referendum, I don't mind spending the money on something like this, an idea that we actually understand that will have a real impact for the Constitution. We didn't have that with The Voice. Most people didn't understand it. And I'll tell you this, if this idea did get up going to a referendum, I believe it would be one of the few to pass with the yes vote. Safety in our community is a real concern at the moment, as is cost of living, but it doesn't have to be one or the other. If there are people in our community doing the wrong thing who are also citizens of another country, then as far as I'm concerned, their country can deal with them and make Australia just that little bit safer. Okay, let me know your thoughts on that one. You know how to do it. Whatever you're thinking, leave a comment in the comment section of this video. We'll be doing feedback shortly, but does it make you as angry as me to think we can't do two things at once? And this narrative by the media that we can't do that? Let me know. Moving on now, and in what should be a concern for every Australian, the pharmaceutical benefit scheme is about to face the fight of its life. As Donald Trump takes his trade war to the world, American medical giants have seen the opportunity to destroy the program that keeps medicines down in Australia. Basically, they want Trump to impose punitive tariffs on Australia because we subsidise medicines for millions of patients through the PBS. As per the SMH, the PBS cost taxpayers $17.7 billion last financial year and helped reduce the cost of 930 different medicines. It means Australians can buy life-saving drugs worth thousands of dollars for as little as $31.60 per script, often after the government has negotiated with the drug company to secure the best deal for taxpayers. And Anthony Albanese this week announced he wants to bring those prices down as part of his election promises. It's good for us, but apparently not so good for these big pharma companies who want to gorge us because they think they're just not making enough profits. Now, while Trump has played the tariff card to try and get his way on a number of issues, I reckon this will be the straw that breaks the camel's back when it comes to Australia, because we don't want an American health system, and we certainly don't want to find ourselves paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for medicines we currently get around for $30. Now, I'm not saying the PBS is perfect. There are many complaints. It takes way too long for new medicines to be approved. But on the whole, we should be grateful for a system like this. And it seems our politicians agree. Health Minister Mark Butler and Coalition Health spokesperson Anne Ruston, they've both vowed to keep the PBS off the table in any trade discussions with the Trump administration. That's according to the SMH. Good. And if any leader allows the US to bully us into dropping the PBS, then we might as well give up. And if they try it on, we need our government to fight back. Damn the consequences. The only way to beat a bully is to fight back, even if you end up getting your ass kicked. At least they'll think twice coming after you again and look for someone weaker who won't put up a fight. America has no right to dictate to us what schemes we should have in place for our health system. And I genuinely believe it's something both sides of politics believe. Luckily, we're in a position where we import more from them than we export. So, if they want to play the tariff war, it's a war that we could win. So, don't even think about it, America. Well, this season of Married at First Sight, it might be a rating success, but it's also raising concerns over the production techniques used behind the scenes. New South Wales Police launched an investigation last month after a groom punched a hole in a wall in an off-camera confrontation with his wife. A week later, Safe Work New South Wales launched a wider investigation into Channel 9 and production company Endemol Shine. To find out more about what's happening, let's bring in the man who broke that second story, Joshua Fox from the MAFS Funny podcast. Thanks for joining us.
No worries. Thank you for having me, Rob.
Mate, it's a pleasure. Do you know what concerns Safe Work New South Wales has about the production of the show?
Yeah, I mean, well, it seems like there's a long list depending on which cast member they speak to. I believe this all stemmed from two different cast members with two separate complaints, and they were kind of just about unreasonable requests during production, not being able to leave when they wanted to, long hours. They claimed they were being treated inhumanely, which is obviously a very strong accusation when you think about what's happening in the world. But yeah, I think there's a lot for them to go off.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you and I have had a chat about this on your MAFS Funny podcast. And one of the things I think these participants don't know is their own rights. Yes, they're forced to, they sign a contract and that is pushed, but they can't be kidnapped.
Well, this is the thing. I think when they get to the point where they want to leave, they fall for these kind of tactics of manipulation that producers use. For example, Morena this year, she said she wanted to leave 3 weeks before she did. And every time she said, I'm leaving, they'd come back and say, well, if you do that, your reputation's going to be ruined. You'll never work in Australia again. And they really drive that narrative that you almost have to stay there, because if you don't, you'll lose everything you'd ever worked for. And then Morena told me it got to the point where she said, actually, I'm going to phone the police and say, you're holding me against my will unless I leave this show today. And then what happens? She left the show that day.
That is shocking. And you are investigating the production of the show in your MAFS Funny podcast. What are your concerns about the show?
My concerns are just it's going too far. I'm from the UK, you tell by the accent. I used to work across reality there as a tabloid journalist for the magazines. And I was there when I didn't break the stories, when we covered the tragic passing of several Love Island UK stars and then Love Island host Caroline Flack, multiple suicides related to that show. And I just see the same pattern happening in Australia now, where we're slowly getting to the extreme that show was. And every year, like, I've been covering maths for 6 years now through various different jobs, and every year there's no shortage of cast members phoning me up saying, I'm not coping, I'm over medicating on Valium, I never should have done this, I've got no will to carry on living. And thankfully they get through that. But this show's meant to entertain, and it just feels like as each year passes, that becomes more and more of a common response from these people. So actually, behind the scenes, yes, Nine and Endemol do take their duty of care seriously. They give out the same statement saying, there is help available. But actually, it seems that's not enough, given what everyone who leaves the show comes out and says.
Well, if you're being manipulated psychologically and they know everything about them, do you genuinely think the production of this show could result in a death?
Yes, I genuinely do think that unless they do scale it back and reassess how they treat these people day to day, someone will unfortunately take their lives. And we've seen that a couple of years ago, 2023, with Charlie Newling, a contestant on The Bachelorette Australia. He struggled after the show. I spoke to several of his co-stars after he sadly took his own life, and they all questioned, should he even have been on that show in the first place? Because he had been through a lot in his life before the show. He was potentially too fragile, too vulnerable. And another question I'm kind of raising is, well, should half these cast members go on?
Yeah. Well, you made headlines around the world this week. There's the headline from The Sun for your investigation into Married at First Sight, specifically this interaction with expert John Aiken.
Okay, we go. Hey, John, MAFS Funny podcast, mate. How you doing?
Josh.
A couple of questions for you.
I'm not going to answer your questions, but I will introduce myself.
Do you ever feel ethically and morally compromised what you do on that show?
Do you know what? I'm not going to answer your questions.
Yep.
But what I would suggest you do is you put them to Nine.
I have
or
them.
Endemol Shine.
None of them replied to me.
And
I've messaged you as well.
have you?
Yes.
When did you do that?
Last night.
Is that right?
Yes. You got nothing you wish to say?
Gosh.
Do you not agree this season's crossed the line?
I'm amazed at your perseverance.
Well, no one's answering these questions.
Maybe that's a you problem.
Right, I think it's a you problem, what's happening on the show. You've also been accused of enabling abusive behaviour.
What else you got for me, Josh?
Do you and your wife follow the tasks you're doing there? Would you go share a bed with someone else for a few days to strengthen the marriage?
What else you got?
Is it the money or the fame why you keep going against the principles of a psychologist?
It's funny, you employed the very techniques that current affair uses, but Nine sent you a cease and desist letter alleging you harassed John Aiken. What's your reaction?
Yeah, the irony there, like, as I said in the setup to that video, I took inspiration from a current affair. If they don't get answers from someone they want answers from, this is what they do. So when you turn the tables to them, apparently it's now classified as harassment and intimidation. But when they do it, it's journalism. So I'm not sure how that one works.
Yeah, are you surprised how big this story went with your interaction with John? Papers around the world reported it. I mentioned The Sun. 7 News even did a story about it. Is this just wild to you?
Yeah, because often my Married at First Sight stuff, it makes the Daily Mail, it makes news.com.au, blows up on TikTok. But this feels like it's gone that next level. And the reason I think it is because every year this show, like, it churns out villain after villain, right? And I think Channel 9 like how the media will go after these people. We kind of hammer them in a way. We really make their lives a misery with our coverage. But this year I thought, well, actually, why should I do that? Let's look beyond that and question how are these people got in this situation? Who's maybe responsible? Like, who's pulling the strings? And then John Aiken has obviously been there 10 years on this show, longest serving, I suppose, cast member, you'd say. So therefore, to me, he's the biggest name associated with MAFS, the biggest talent. So I think it's time John answers questions, because the only chats I see him doing are, Today Show, Weekend Today, Today Extra, 9
Safe
Now,
places.
all these. Yeah, and then, someone actually asked him a genuine question, and that first question, do you feel ethically and morally compromised? That was because his former co-star, Dr. Trisha Stratford, before she sadly passed away, she said, I left that show because I felt ethically and morally compromised. So my question is, well, if she felt that way, given the direction of the show, did John not? Does Mel not? And obviously he didn't want to answer that, and he laughed at me instead, which kind of says it all to me, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you mention the previous expert, because your podcast explains that she left because she wasn't comfortable with the direction of the show. You have mentioned in this interview that you think there are quite a few contestants who should never be participants. So what is the line, Nine and Endemol Shine, and the experts who are taking part now, what is the line they're crossing?
Well, I just think if someone's been through deep trauma in their lives, if they've struggled with the mental health previously, I'm doing my next podcast episode is looking at the mental health of these people, and a lot of them have publicly in various interviews, YouTube channels, talked about before they ever got involved with MAFS, they have attempted to take their own lives due to, their own personal reasons. But to me, if someone's ever been in that dark of a place, to then put them on the biggest show in the country, where we all know there's going to be a level of scrutiny and pressure that most people will struggle with, let alone someone we know has already been to such a low where they've not wanted to live anymore. And there's one contestant from season 8 or 9, he's called Jake Edwards, and he's an interesting case study, which I cover in my next podcast, where he was a former AFL player. He retired early, and then after he retired, he struggled with his identity. What's next? Who am I? What am I without footy? And he spiraled into drug and alcohol abuse. He's very open about this. And then there was one day he unfortunately tried to take his life. When that was unsuccessful, that was a turning point. He started a YouTube channel, a men's mental health charity, kind of based around maybe men in sport who don't talk about their feelings. And then 2 years later, after publicly talking about his attempt, he was then put on Married at First Sight. And then to me, firstly, knowing how much this person struggled with being in the spotlight, then out of the spotlight previously, why did we cast him? And then 6 months after that show finished airing, Jake did a radio interview where he said he, again, tried to take his own life. And it was his mum who saved him, because he struggled with dealing with the aftermath of MAFS. And him as the case study, again, he's interesting because he wasn't a villain. He wasn't necessarily hated. He got a favorable edit, and he was generally a nice, liked person. But this is the impact the show had on him. So imagine what it'd be like for the villains who cop all the hate.
Yeah, and look, these are serious topics, and we should mention that if this is raising any concerns for you, you can always reach out to Lifeline and alternatively Beyond Blue. But where do you draw the line? Because these people are openly applying to be part of this show. So how much responsibility do you ultimately take if you mentioned Jake had a favourable edit, but it still wasn't enough?
Well, I think it's just the checks beforehand have to be a lot more thorough. And I know everyone meets with a psychiatrist or psychologist and they go through those evaluations. But if someone has previously tried to take their own life, what do these tests beforehand have to show up for us to go, actually, maybe this person won't do so well? So that's what I'm kind of trying to drill in. I don't want MAFS to get cancelled. I think it's a great show when it is great, but lately it's crossed the line. And unless they do reevaluate these things, it is going to have irreversible consequences, sadly.
Well, Nine's new CEO, Matt Stanton, is on the record as saying MAFS is one of Nine's most profitable assets. He said that while he was still the interim CEO. That being the case, do you really expect any fallout or changes to the show when it's such a cash cow for Nine?
Well, that's kind of the thing. It's like, at what cost do these profits come at? Because if it does keep going to an extreme and somebody does take their life, is that going to be the only reason they will then stop it? Like, do we really want to get to that point just so this network can keep making tens of millions? People will still watch the show if they scale things back behind the scenes. People don't need to know that side of things. Just, I don't know. I think in the media, everyone has a level of responsibility, right? And how things have changed these days, we're a lot more aware of things. We don't watch things as blindly anymore. We actually question, is that right? Is that wrong? Whereas, you know, maybe 10 years ago, we'd just watch it and go, ha, and then we wouldn't think about it again. Whereas now we're going, actually, that's not right. And we're using our voices more. I'm seeing fans of the show on TikTok, they can get 5 million views calling out production and a scene. And that's more than people are watching the show now. So I don't know. I think now is the time. And if anyone is profiting from this show, whether it's a creator like me, a website, a blog, a journalist, anything, and they're not also questioning this, then the day something bad does happen, then I believe they will also have blood on their hands, sadly.
Josh, your podcast is compelling listening. It's the MAFS Funny podcast, and each Sunday you have your big, longer form investigation. You've got sort of daily episodes with 8-minute hits, but the Sunday versions is really your big investigation, and it's great journalism. What you're uncovering is fantastic, and it is a story. As content creators for any producer on television across any reality TV show, I think they all need to listen to this. Thank you for joining us on McKnight Tonight.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Rob.
It's the random life shot of the day. Where are you going today? You never know where you'll end up with the random life shot of the day.
And our random live shot of the day takes you to Heathrow Airport, where operations have now returned to normal after a fire led to an unprecedented shutdown, forcing flights to divert to other parts of Europe. Temperature-wise, it's a wet and rainy 16 degrees after a low of 8. And look at that. That is literally a live shot, or it was a live shot. It's looking a bit still now. I think we may have lost the live shot just as we go. But I promise you, moments ago, it looked fabulous. We were watching planes come in. Well, that's live stream. Yep, there it goes. It's gone. Great YouTube page to go to anyway. All right, let's take a look at your feedback coming through to McKnight Tonight. I tell you what, I'm going to go back to that random live shot of the day a little later and we'll sort it up. Guy Watt says, McKnight is always right. Thank you, Guy. And I have a cup that says always right. I might bring that next week. Over the page we go. And we have Dylan Milton says, wasn't a good interview by Dutton. Interestingly, Dylan, I thought during that interview that Nat Barr, when she was pressing him about cost of living, she actually at one point towards the end of his answer went, yeah, okay. And I thought he got her on side, so maybe it wasn't as bad as you might be making out. Over the page we go to our next bit of feedback. Jeanette Mason says, hello, Jeanette. Lovely to see you. PBS, I couldn't live if we didn't have PBS. Some of my drugs keep me alive. And this is the point, Jeanette. This is really the point I think we need to remember, that Americans don't like our system, our public health system, and they don't like our PBS system. And Big Pharma makes a lot of money as it is. And basically, no side of politics can allow the Trump presidency and the Trump government to tell us how to run our health system here in Australia. And to be honest, no one's going to do it because it would be political suicide. All right, we go over the page. We got Dylan saying, leave the PBS alone. No one would be able to afford medication without it. And that's true. Remember, there was a guy who bought the rights to a drug in the US and then started charging thousands of dollars. And while everyone turned on him, people had to buy it because you couldn't get that drug anywhere else. Let's see what Jan's saying. Jan says, I tend to agree with Natalie Barr. The millions it would cost for a referendum could house people sleeping in tents and in cars. I see your point that any criminal who breaks the law and is from overseas should be deported back to their own country. Thank you, Jan. That is the point I would make here, is that we can walk and chew gum. And there's no doubt a referendum would cost millions of dollars. What was it, 70 million? I'm pulling that out of thin air for the voice referendum. I think this is possibly more important. We should be looking at Indigenous issues, but that wasn't the right issue. We didn't understand that issue. But as far as safety goes in our community, that's a really important issue and one we shouldn't forget. Thank you for your feedback. We'll have more a little later in the show.
Here comes McKnight Tonight.
Now, did you see that story this week about Welcome to Country at Macquarie University? The Australian reports law students face the threat of failing a key exam if they perform an underwhelming acknowledgement of country or refuse to acknowledge traditional Aboriginal owners at all. The presentation is worth 30% of the final course mark, and students have been told the acknowledgement of country is one of the key 5 marketing areas. I mean, how is this even a thing? Knowing the law is not dependent on performing a welcome to country, and these universities have to stop dictating what is and what isn't appropriate when it comes to our culture. You cannot force someone to perform an acknowledgement of country, especially when it's a made-up ceremony to help white guilt. You don't believe me? Have a look at this video by a user called Kaisha, who makes a lot of TikToks talking about culture.
Onpi, I hope it's okay to ask, is acknowledgement of country an actual Aboriginal traditional practice, or is it like a modern white saviour thing? It is a made-up protocol by Reconciliation Australia. It's not culture, it's not our way, but it's been institutionalised to make people think that it is our culture.
Right. How can a university possibly make acknowledgement of country worth 30% of a student's final mark when the protocol isn't even part of Indigenous culture in the first place? Now, look, I don't actually have a problem with Welcome to Country at major events, although we don't need it at everything that brings a small group of people together. It happens so much now, I reckon it's lost all value and it doesn't actually mean anything, which goes against the very thing it was intended to do. Like everything in life, it's all about balance. And on this issue, universities should be marking grades based on the curriculum, not a left-leaning agenda that's trying to shoehorn an issue into a course. Acknowledgement of country can actually mean something, but it loses value the more we do it. As that Indigenous Australian said, it's made up. It isn't part of Indigenous culture, but it does help white guilt. It helps left-leaning white people feel good about themselves and say, we're paying respects. There are plenty of ways to pay respects to Indigenous culture. Forcing students to live this narrative that isn't really anything to do, no matter how much they try to pretend it is, it's nothing to do with their course. And it's just bloody ridiculous.
Here comes McKnight Tonight.
Okay, let me know what you think by leaving your thoughts in the comment section of the video. Do you think Welcome to Country should be part of the curriculum, especially in a law degree? Maybe you disagree, let me know. Meanwhile, the star of Grey's Anatomy has hit out at the fact her male co-star was on a higher wage than her, even though she played the title character. Ellen Pompeo says she couldn't help but feel salty about the pay gap between her and her Grey's Anatomy co-star, Patrick Dempsey. Dempsey was paid more than her because he was a much bigger name and had previous experience filming TV pilots when their hit series premiered. Well, why are we talking about this? It's right there. He was a bigger star. I don't get this thing in Hollywood. There is a big difference between actors and accountants. If you've got 2 accountants doing the exact same job, then absolutely a woman should not be paid less than a man for the same job. But if you have 2 actors or 2 TV presenters and one of them is more well-known and is capable of possibly drawing an audience, then they absolutely should be paid more. Patrick Dempsey was a name I knew before Grey's Anatomy started. Ellen Pompeo wasn't. And she even admits that this was her first show. She says in this article in Entertainment Weekly, and I'm looking at it here, I'm going to read you this quote. Pompeo acknowledged that, in Dempsey's defence, Grays was her first ever television pilot and that no one knew who I was at the time, adding, everybody knew who he was, so he did deserve that money. I'm not saying he didn't deserve that money. Good. But she goes on to say that she should have been getting the same amount because she was the title character. No! You got the opportunity of a lifetime. By becoming famous because of this role, you then demand a higher pay rate. You demand a higher pay, which is great, which is fantastic. You can then, on your next job or when the series is renewed, you can demand a higher pay. And by the end of it, possibly be on more than Patrick Dempsey. But at this point in time, when this show started, you didn't deserve the same amount. It's like Carl Stefanovic and Lisa Wilkinson. Lisa Wilkinson tried to make the pay gap an issue. But I would argue when they were co-hosting the Today Show together, Carl Stefanovic was a bigger name. He was a Gold Logie winner. He was doing reports on 60 Minutes. He was a bigger draw card for that show than Lisa. So she did not deserve pay parity. This is not a male-female thing. If Patrick Dempsey was doing a TV show or a movie with Scarlett Johansson, guess who deserves the most money? Patrick Dempsey. No, I'm joking. Of course, Scarlett Johansson deserves the money. She is a bigger star. This is not about male-female. In terms of Hollywood, and sometimes in terms of what you bring to a job, pay parity shouldn't exist, especially in the creative arts. And maybe even in business. If there is a female who has a lot more value to a company than a male, then she should be on more money, even if they are doing the same job. Now, there is a problem with women being on less than men. That exists, and that is 100% true. But we also can't be silly about this. Patrick Dempsey was a star. At this point, she wasn't. So it's okay. It is okay that they didn't earn the same amount. And women in this field who earn millions of dollars need to stop bitching about it. Because quite frankly, people who work everyday jobs, they're the ones we have to fight for pay parity. For some self-entitled actress who says, well, I was there in the show, I should have been on the same amount of money. No, I'm sorry, that's not how it works. Stop your whinging, live a happy life in your Hollywood mansion. You've got a good life. Enough. Guess what? We found that random live shot of the day. Let's go. Oh, no, we lost it. Right, there it is. Oh, maybe I should have just given up. That is a live shot of Heathrow Airport where the planes are coming back in. As I mentioned, they had that big fire 24 hours ago that led to an unprecedented shutdown, forcing flights to divert to other parts of Europe. I know that a few, or at least one Qantas flight ended up in Paris, and they had to take the tunnel back to get to London. And what's interesting about this camera, there is literally a camera just filming all the planes coming in. It follows one, it goes down, and then it goes all the way back and follows the next. It's great for plane spotters, which I've never been, but I am sort of fascinated by this. I could just watch this. What plane is it? Is it a Qantas plane? We couldn't be that lucky to get a Qantas plane coming in. And I'm sorry, I'm going to hold on this until... Go in, yes, thank you, Mr. Cameraman or Mrs. Cameraman or other. What kind of plane have we got there? Oh, bit of a wobble there as it comes in for landing. And what have we got? You know what? I've got a feeling I won't be able to recognise or is it a British Airways? Looks a bit small, doesn't it? So it looks like it might be. This is riveting, Rob. I thought it would go, I've got to be honest, I thought it would go a little bit faster than that. But yeah, I think it's British Airways. All right, let's go to some feedback coming through to McKnight Tonight. And we start with Dylan. The voice of the referendum cost $400 million. Thank you, Dylan. Yeah, when I was saying 70, I knew I had it wrong, but I was pulling it out of my bum. But, you know, like, I know we hear $400 million and we go, we can't do that, outrageous. But in the terms of government spending, this sounds ridiculous, but it's actually not a lot. And It's what we have to do if we want to change the Constitution and make this a thing. All right, Jen, what are you saying? What did it prove in the end for that much of taxpayers' money? Jen is talking about the voice referendum, and it proved, Jen, that politicians don't know what the people are thinking, because Anthony Albanese ran that through and he didn't care what people were saying and what they thought. He just said, well, I'm saying it's the right thing to do, so you better do it. All right, Justine, what are you telling us tonight? Instead of penalising students for underwhelming acknowledgement, why not support them to learn and develop understanding? Wouldn't that be a better long-term solution for all? Yes. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. That's correct, Justine. Thank you very much. Let's go over the page. And we've got this one on our YouTube page. Thank you, Radio Notes. McKnight is right. Well, I think that's the first time we've had a comment from Radio Notes, and I love seeing that YouTube symbol. Thank you, Radio Notes. Really appreciate that. And Jimmy says, bugger, it's not a Qantas plane. It was worth the wait. Thank you, Jimmy. I do appreciate that. Keep your feedback coming in. We love seeing what you have to say right here on McKnight Tonight. Okay, now it's time for Rob's rant. This is where I get something that's really bugging me off my chest. Have a look at this news report from 10 News and see if you can work out why it infuriated me so much.
A long overdue homecoming. Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore splashing down off the coast of Florida. As the relieved crew waited for the mothership to pick them up, a pod of dolphins celebrated their return.
Oh, did they, 10 News? The dolphins knew what was going on and they came by to celebrate. Seriously, is this what passes for journalism these days? A pod of dolphins couldn't have been attracted to a disturbance in the water. No, they were there to celebrate the safe return of those astronauts. Give me a break. I know that some of you might go, oh, they were just trying to be fun about the dolphins being there. But I saw other news reports where the dolphins were acknowledged, and it's absolutely acknowledged the dolphins. But it's not factual. The dolphins were not there to celebrate the astronauts coming home. It is the most ridiculous comment to make. That reporter was Catherine Firkin, and I think she's got to be Firkin joking if she thinks that's a smart line to put in that report. It is just dumbfounding to me that everyone thought, oh, we'll be clever here and we'll put the dolphins were there to celebrate. It is absolutely ridiculous. I'm going to ask Amanda to play that clip again. And I'm going to get you to watch it again and let me know if I'm being silly with my thoughts on this.
A long overdue homecoming. Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore splashing down off the coast of Florida. As the relieved crew waited for the mothership to pick them up, a pod of dolphins celebrated their return.
What a Catherine Firkin joke. It's like when political reporters will see a shot of a politician walking with grey clouds behind them and say, there was a storm brewing for the opposition leader today. I mean, political stories are the worst. And you know, I confronted Mark Riley at 7 News about this, their chief political reporter, who I know pretty well and I really like. But I said to him, why do you do it? And he said, well, you've got to make politics entertaining somehow. And I'll sort of cop that. But this one, nah. Sorry, Catherine Firkin. Firkin off. All right. I'm proud of that. I mean, what a name to have. I couldn't resist it. All right, that brings us to the end of McKnight Tonight. Thank you so much for joining the show live, or if you're watching it on delay, thank you for joining us. We will be back at 9 o'clock next Saturday night in Sydney, Melbourne time, and that'll be 8 o'clock in Queensland. Have a great weekend. I'm Rob McKnight, and it's good night from McKnight.
It's good night from McKnight Tonight.